So you're 30, right?
Almost 30.
Almost 30. So what's that make you in weightlifting years?
Old as fuck. I've been weightlifting for 8 years now, so I'm old school. And don't I know about it? But yeah, eight long years of weightlifting. So intermittently, usually I take about 6 months off to just train, and then I kind of look for competitions to peak for. I'd say I'm more of a recreational weightlifter than I am kind of a competitive weightlifter. I just find that it gives me more longevity, which is the reason why I've been training for 8 years, because I enjoy it, much like a lot of people don't, which is the hard thing about weightlifting is there's a lot of moving pieces to weightlifting, and if you get hung up in just the sport outside of like the fact that it is just essentially exercising or training hard, you know, you don't last very long. So I compete, but just whenever I feel ready, rather than kind of forcing my body to be like, right, let's get ready for something. Mixture of both. So when I first started, I had a coach. So I actually started in CrossFit. Obviously, I know CrossFit does have a fairly bad rep, and it's starting to get better. But what it does do well is it's got a community vibe. I think that's the biggest thing, is it allows people to train who wouldn't necessarily fit in a category of like a basketball player or a weightlifter. They're just like general athletes. And it has some bad bits, but you know, we're not here to talk about that. So yeah, I had a CrossFit coach to start off with, and then when I moved to London, I hired a coach or worked with a weightlifting club. Decided that wasn't right for me, so moved on to someone else who was much better fit for me for 2 years. And that was at the time where I started actually coaching weightlifting. So I had a stab for 2 years coaching myself. 5 years of weightlifting at that point, and then I felt like the kind of scope of British weightlifting is quite small. And I wanted to kind of reach outside of that scope, so I actually hired my now coach, which is a guy called Arek Michalski, Polish lifter, a very good lifter, which has been interesting because obviously he grew up in a kind of more of a traditional Soviet based program, but the Polish style is their own spin on it, and it's nice because it's different to how a lot of British coaches would coach it. It's just like different system. So yeah, that's my current coach now. So it's changed a lot. When I was a bit younger, I would train 5-6 days a week, which battered my body. And I tried to hang on to that for years. And I think that's what kind of brought me into coaching, as well as I wanted to understand like, how does fatigue impact my training? Because weightlifting is not just about accruing lots of volume. You know, you could do a lot of work over 16 weeks but not actually do that much, if that makes any sense. And it's like a kind of fitting the puzzles together. Now I train 4 days a week. Sometimes if I have the energy, I'll do 5, and that's just kind of up to me and my coach's discretion. In terms of the variations for the snatch and clean and jerk, I'm probably snatching 2 or 3 times a week, whether that be full snatches from the floor or a variation of that, like blocks or powers or muscle snatches. And then I'm cleaning twice a week. I have more frequency in the snatch, but less volume. And I have less frequency in the clean and jerk, but more volume, which has been an interesting change because I used to do it 4 days a week, but I've noticed it's actually really helped me snatch more regularly because it's practicing. And with the clean and jerks twice a week, I'm able to kind of hammer that in twice a week. So I kind of choose like, okay, today I feel great. I'm going to push the intensity on the clean and jerks. And then the next session might just be like, you know, technical work off the blocks or powers or whatever I need to improve. Because it's like a whack-a-mole, right? That's how I explain weightlifting a lot. It's like you hit one problem and then something else pops up, and, you know, and a lot of people get hung up that like, weightlifting is supposed to be perfect, but I think that's also the best thing about weightlifting, is that it's just a continual journey to improve. But a lot of people get overwhelmed by that, but for me it's a game, which is why I call it whack-a-mole, because you hit one thing, another can crop up, otherwise it's just boring. And weightlifting is monotonous, but it doesn't have to be boring. So the principles remain the same, but there's some individual differences. You know, I've noticed if I snatch heavy 2 or 3 times a week, there's no chance. And so the frequency for me is what's important, because it's just practice. And then the clean and jerk is just do the work. And you know, it's worked well, yeah. It's very much in the traditional sense to basically always be ready. You know, because I'm not preparing for competitions, I actually quite like the idea of just training to train. So I don't necessarily go through, or at least my coach doesn't push me through like the traditional kind of hypertrophy or hypertrophy strength and then power, or however else you might do it. We would essentially just be like, okay, what do we need to improve in this cycle? Leg strength. So we do more squats and we still keep the intensity relatively high around the clean and jerk and the snatch, but the main emphasis is the leg strength. And so that would then dictate the volume and the intensity on the snatch and the clean and jerk. But for me, I noticed that one of the biggest changes I've made in my own training, and I've had to speak to my coach about this, is I used to, a couple years ago, I used to be the person that would go lots of volume, taper off into a strength phase, and then kind of peak for a competition. And I think that was kind of, the mindset was, you have a house and we're always trying to push up the ceiling. I think a lot of people focus too much on pushing the ceiling higher. So what I mean is, you know, best snatch is 126. It would take a lot for me to snatch 130, but it probably won't take as much for me to snatch 110 every week. And so I'm pulling the floor towards my ceiling so that the weights that I'm doing that are submaximal are more consistent. And that for me has made the biggest impact in my training, is because I'm just hitting the numbers. Not every week, but it's just far more consistent, and my body's ability to tolerate that load has tremendously improved. It's not going to take me 20 weeks to get a 126 snatch. It might take me 3 or 4 weeks. So actually I'm kind of maxing out or around that probably every couple weeks. And it's not like a max out where I'm pushing 126 to 127. It might be, right, let's do a heavy double or heavy triple or off the blocks or something that keeps training novel and fun for me, you know, yeah. I would say probably upper body mechanics. I know that when I first came in, a lot of British coaches, it's changing now, but a lot of British coaches would say, and I know that this phrase is still chucked around a lot, when the arms bend, the power ends. So my coach has emphasized that after contact, I still need to keep connection with the bar. And that's really helped me understand that the lift doesn't finish until the bar is overhead and I've stood up. So I need to continually keep pulling and then punching my arms out, so I'm much more active in the turnover or the third pull. So I'd say that one, and then I think just the emphasis on my position more than anything is like, position will dictate load and speed. So if my position is wrong, then we don't need to go back down to a PVC pipe or a bar, but we just need to make sure that we're doing it correctly, keeping the chest open, back tight, and pushing through the legs. So it's simpler, I think, because the English is not as good. He has to just keep things really simple. He'll just say something, back needs to be tight, more legs, you know. And sometimes people wouldn't, you know, necessarily like that. They'd like a kind of more drawn out answer. But for me, that works really well, is just thinking like chest open, keep at the same angle, push hard through the legs, you know, and that really works for me. So I guess the way that I would coach things would be just coach what's in front of you. I think like when I first started, I always thought that we'd have to like coach from a textbook style. And so if your torso isn't completely, or your shoulders aren't starting over the bar, then we need to correct that. And for the most part, that's very important, because we need to get the basics correct and get positions correct. But the more you watch people, the more you realize that actually there could potentially be an anatomical reason for that, or they could just have a weak lower back. And so you seeing that, or weak legs or whatever it might be, so you seeing that as a coach and being like, oh, it's interesting that they start with a lower hip position. Most of the time I'd leave it alone unless it becomes a problem. But for the most part, I'd say, okay, well, why are they starting with a lower hip position? How is that advantageous to them? Do they have shorter legs? Do they have shorter arms? And I guess it's taken me a long time to get to that conclusion. So I'd say, again, I just coach kind of what's in front of me, and if it needs to be changed, then I would change it, is probably the answer that I would give without going down into the weeds too much.